A smug smirk was plastered on his face, glued there as he jabbered loudly into his absurdly expensive phone, completely swallowed up in his own little world of self-importance. "Tim," Richard bellowed into the mouthpiece, laughing arrogantly, the sound bouncing off the high-end storefronts like an unwanted echo. "I don't deal in millions, darling, only billions. If they can't afford me, they're simply not worth my time." His voice, dripping with entitlement and ego, echoed as he strutted forward, barely acknowledging his surroundings. His expensive, perfectly tailored suit practically screamed money, while his laser focus on himself blinded him to the real world. Just ahead, a black street sweeper named Darnell, dressed in well-worn, faded blue coveralls that had seen better days, was quietly and diligently mopping the sprawling marble entrance to the gleaming skyscraper. His head was slightly bowed, his gaze locked onto the task at hand, the rhythmic swish of the mop, the only sound breaking the early morning quiet. He moved with a quiet grace, a sense of purpose that belied the seemingly menial nature of his job. Richard, still blathering on his call, totally oblivious to anything but his own inflated self-image, stepped directly onto the freshly mopped surface. His brand new Italian leather shoe, undoubtedly costing more than Darnell made a month, lost its traction on the slick marble. He skidded awkwardly, his arms flailing wildly for a split second before he managed to catch himself, barely avoiding a faceplant worthy of a YouTube fail compilation. His face contorted in a volcanic eruption of anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Richard bellowed, his voice a thunderous roar that startled a flock of pigeons from a nearby ledge. He advanced menacingly on Darnell, his expensive shoe leaving a smeared, watery streak on the pristine marble. "Do you have any idea how much these shoes cost, you idiot?" Darnell immediately stepped back, his movements controlled and graceful, his posture conveying quiet dignity despite Richard's vitriol. His hands remained clasped loosely in front of him. "I'm sorry, sir," Darnell replied calmly, his voice a low rumble, betraying no trace of the shock or fear he likely felt. "I was just cleaning the entrance. Let me dry it up for you." Richard let out a mocking chuckle, dripping with sarcasm and contempt. "Of course. That's all you people do, isn't it? Clean. Take orders. Serve those who actually matter." He punctuated his words with a dismissive wave of his hand, as if dismissing Darnell's entire existence. "Just go back to sweeping, boy." Several passers-by stopped to watch the unfolding confrontation, their expressions shifting from initial surprise to a growing sense of discomfort and unease. Some averted their gaze, as if embarrassed by the blatant display of arrogance and disdain, while others surreptitiously pulled out their phones, ready to document the potential train wreck. Then, without any warning whatsoever, Richard's simmering rage boiled over into outright physical aggression. He snatched Darnell's mop from his grasp, the wooden handle creaking under his forceful grip, and with a guttural grunt, flung it across the polished pavement. The mop had exploded in a shower of dirty water and tattered fibers, landing with pathetic thud against a nearby parked car. Gasps rippled through the small crowd. Richard, now smirking with malicious satisfaction, delivered the final insult. "Oops," he said, the word dripping with faux sincerity. "Guess you're out of work for today, huh? Maybe go beg on the street instead. Deadbeat." Darnell's dark eyes flickered, a momentary flash of something intense and unreadable behind them. He clenched his jaw tightly, the muscles flexing visibly beneath his skin. His hands tightened into fists at his sides, but he remained outwardly silent, refusing to give Richard the satisfaction of an angry outburst. Instead, he locked eyes with Richard for just a beat, his gaze steady, unwavering, conveying a controlled intensity that seemed to briefly unsettle Richard's swagger. Then, without uttering a single word, Darnell calmly bent down, picked up his broken mop, now a pathetic collection of splintered wood and shredded fibers, and walked away, his shoulders squared, his head held high, his pace even. There was a quiet dignity to his retreat that somehow amplified Richard's cruelty. What Richard didn't know, in that moment of unchecked hubris, was that his entire life was about to undergo a cataclysmic transformation, a karmic shift that would rewrite the narrative of his existence forever. Inside an ultra-modern, glass-walled conference room perched high above the city, overlooking the very street Richard had just abused Darnell, high-powered executives, their faces grim, sat around a massive, boat-shaped oval table crafted from gleaming mahogany. A nervous energy crackled in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Expensive leather folders were opened, displaying complex charts and graphs that spoke of millions lost and potential financial ruin. Richard stormed into the room, his suit rumpled, his tie askew, still radiating the residual heat of his morning tantrum. His smugness had been temporarily displaced by annoyance, but was already beginning to reassert itself. He adjusted his cufflinks with a practiced flick of his wrist. A board member, a pale, nervous man named Abernathy, cleared his throat and nervously addressed Richard. "Sir, we have a major problem with the Tricorp acquisition deal." Richard rolled his eyes, exasperated. "What now? What's the hang-up? Just offer them double. That's what we always do. Problem solved. Are you people seriously incapable of handling anything without me?" The executive cleared his throat. "Sir, we can't. Tricorp, it was just purchased by another investor." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Purchased? What are you telling me? Some penny stock outfit outbid Winston Enterprises? Who the hell outbid me?" He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the crystal water glasses. Abernathy hesitated, his atoms apple-bobbing nervously. That's the thing, sir. It wasn't an investment firm. It was an individual." Another executive, a younger woman named Bennett, chimed in, her voice laced with hesitant nervousness. "And, sir, it appears to have been purchased by Mr. Darnell Harrison." A heavy, oppressive silence fell over the room, broken only by the distant hum of the city far below. The executives exchanged uneasy glances, avoiding Richard's gaze. Richard frowned, his face contorting in a mixture of confusion and burgeoning rage. "Darnell freaking who? Who the hell is Darnell Harrison? Never heard of him." The nervous executive, Abernathy, hesitantly slid a thin file across the polished table towards Richard. Richard snatched it up, flipping it open with a violent jerk, his eyes scanning the documents, his impatience growing with each passing second. His face slowly drained of color, his jaw slackening, until he finally froze, his breath caught in his throat. Inside the file, staring back at him with an unwavering gaze, was a photo of Darnell, the same street sweeper he had humiliated just hours before. Only in the photo, he wasn't wearing worn-out coveralls and holding a broken mop. He was immaculately dressed in a bespoke suit, a confident smile playing on his lips, and the background showcased a sleek, private jet on a sun-drenched tarmac. The executive Bennett, seeing Richard's stunned silence, spoke softly, filling the vacuum of the room. "Sir, Darnell Harrison is a self-made billionaire. He's a tech genius. He sold his cybersecurity company to Omnicorp several years ago for billions, and then he seemingly disappeared, went completely off the grid. No one has seen or heard from him until now." Richard's hands began to tremble uncontrollably. His mouth worked soundlessly, trying to form the words, but finding his throat constricted with a combination of disbelief and sheer, unadulterated terror. The full, horrific realization crashed over him like a tidal wave, threatening to drown him completely. He just humiliated, berated, and possibly cost the job of one of the richest, most powerful men in the entire country. A man who now controlled his destiny. The next day, a throng of reporters and photographers jostled for position outside the sleek, newly renovated headquarters of Tricorp, now gleaming with an even brighter sheen. Camera flashes blinked incessantly, illuminating the name emblazoned on the building facade in polished steel letters. Harrison Enterprises. Billionaire Darnell Harrison acquires Winston Enterprises in stunning takeover. One reporter shouted, trying to be heard above the din. Another pressed forward. "Mr. Harrison, can you tell us your plans for the company?" A sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb, and Darnell Harrison emerged, immaculately dressed in a dark suit that seemed to be tailored to perfection. He exuded an aura of quiet confidence, his eyes clear and steady, a slight, almost enigmatic smile playing on his lips. He paused for a moment, taking in the scene with a calm and measured gaze. "Let's just say that some people need to learn the true value of respect," Darnell replied, his voice low and smooth, carrying easily to the entire crowd. His words were simple, Yet they held an undercurrent of steel and determination that sent a chill down the spines of some of the more seasoned reporters. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as the doors of buildings suddenly burst open. Richard stormed out, his face red with a mixture of fury and desperation. He was disheveled, his hair a mess, his suit wrinkled, his expensive shoes scuffed. He looked like a man teetering on the brink of total collapse. "You think you can just take my company from me?" Richard yelled, his voice cracking with a desperate edge. "I built this. This is mine." Darnell simply stood there, unmoving, radiating a calm that only served to further enrage Richard. "No, Mr. Winston," Darnell replied calmly, his voice carrying across the pavement. "You didn't build this. You walked over people like me, people you deemed insignificant, to get here, but today, karma is walking over you." As if on cue, two burly security guards, impeccably dressed in black suits, stepped forward, flanking Darnell and advancing towards Richard with implacable expressions. "Sir," one of the guards said sternly, "you need to leave the premises immediately." Richard, desperate, began to backtrack, his eyes darting from Darnell's impassive face to the imposing figures of security guards. "Wait," he pleaded, his voice losing its edge, becoming pleading and almost pathetic. "This isn't fair. There's got to be some mistake. I can fix this. Let's make a deal, Darnell. I'm sure we can work something out." Darnell tilted his head slightly, a look of cold indifference on his face. "Oh, Mr. Winston, there's no deal to be made. Only a final decision." He gestured toward a nearby table where an aide placed a single sheet of paper, perfectly aligned to face Richard. Richard, driven by desperation, snatched the paper from the table. As he scanned the words printed on the crisp white sheet, his face crumpled. The blood drained from his complexion, leaving his skin ashen. The words stared back at him in stark black ink. "Termination notice." Richard's voice cracked, his eyes pleading, nearly bursting. You can't do this to me. This is MY Company. I'm Richard Winston." Darnell simply raised an eyebrow, a slight, knowing smirk playing on his lips. "Not anymore," he said softly. "You see, what comes around." The crowd erupted into cheers and applause as the two security guards stepped forward, firmly but professionally taking Richard by the arms and leading him away, his protests and pleas fading into the roar of the approving throng. Never underestimate someone based on their job or station. The power is ever shifting, but respect, that they seem to forget, is earned and not taken. In life, what would you do if you were in Darnell's place? Let us know in the comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that will leave you speechless.